I have thought a lot about the Lost Fable over the last couple of years. The history of Remnants that we were given back in Volume 6. The origin stories of Salem and Ozma. The fact that humanity had existed once before, was wiped out by the gods, and returned once again, but without the magic that it once had. The fact that Salem was immortal, and, most importantly, that one last question that Ozma's previous reincarnation asked Jinn. How do I destroy Salem? With the answer, you can't. A lot of people have focused on that one question because wording is very important when asking a genie a question or making a wish from a genie, as we've known in many other stories, in particular Aladdin, but that's not the question that we should have been focusing on. The question that we should have been focusing on the entire time is actually the question that RWBY asked Jinn initially, that spawned the entire Lost Fable. What is Ozpin hiding from us? Because that is a fairly vague question. Not only does that mean that the entirety of the Lost Fable is completely dependent on the information Ozpin has. This isn't dependent on what is the true history, it's dependent on what Ozpin knows, or thinks he knows, and is hiding from Team RWBY, from Crow, from Maria, everyone there. That is what that question is dependent on. What Ozpin knows. So, the accuracy of the Lost Fable in and of itself is brought into question, at least certain parts of it, because, for a good portion in the middle, Ozma was dead. He was not present during any of it. During the point in which Salem went to confront the gods. Yeah, he was brought back momentarily, and then wiped out again by the God of Darkness, but after that point, for when Salem got cursed with immortality, for when she went around, first initially trying to kill herself, and then realizing that she could turn humanity against the gods to try to get back at them, and then humanity being wiped out, and everything that followed up until the point in which he returned, Ozma was dead. He was not present for any of that. So how exactly does he know what happened there? Now, there is a possible explanation for that, being we know that a previous incarnation of Ozma was the one who found the Relic of Knowledge, that he asked those 3 questions of Jinn. Where are the relics, what powers do they hold, and how do I destroy Salem? But there is one other question of Jinn used this century that we don't know what exactly it was. Now, it is possible that that question was used by Ozpin to ask Jinn what is the true history of Salem. So he would be able to accurately know this information, and it's something that he's hiding from Team RWBY and everyone else, and that's how he knows that information that was presented in the Lost Fable. That could explain where that one other question of Jinn came from earlier this century, why there was only 2 questions remaining when RWBY first summoned Jinn, and that would also give us a timeline as to when Ozpin actually gathered up all the relics, or the previous incarnation of Ozma. That means it was within the last 200 years that he used those first 3 questions all in one go, and then asked that one other question, and then sealed the relics up in the vaults under the academies, which I think kind of fits the timeline of Remnant, because otherwise the relics probably would have been more prominent throughout history, but really they weren't. They seemed to be used by the King of Vale in the Great War, and then they were sealed away after that point. My guess at this point in time is that after Ozpin asked that one question, that, you know, what is the true history of Salem, found out that she was actually immortal by the gods, because he wouldn't have known that when he asked those first questions. How do I destroy Salem? Well, just given the answer, you can't, doesn't really explain why he can't. So he would have used that one other question to figure out why he can't destroy her. Figuring out that she's actually immortal would be the real reason. So it's up for debate what that one question was that Ozpin asked of Jinn, whether it's what is the true history of Salem, which I don't think that was the question, otherwise, you know, we would have known more about what Salem did when humanity did return, but there's a huge gap in time that we don't know, that we weren't given in the Lost Fable, between the end of previous humanity and, you know, Ozpin's return, or Ozma's return in someone else's body. There's a few thousand years that we don't exactly know what happened to Salem and what she did with the previous incarnation of humanity and, you know, everything associated with that. So a lot can change in a few thousand years, so Salem's overall goal of just wanting to die very likely isn't actually the case. She probably figured out some other motivation within that point in time. But after learning that Salem is in fact immortal, that probably spurred Ozma to realize the only way that he can actually defeat Salem is by preventing her from getting any of the relics. That's what made him find each of the relics. Possibly the Great War also spurred that as well, considering he probably had to use the Sword of Destruction to end that as the King of Vale, but then he decided to seal them all away underneath the Huntsman Academies to do whatever he could to prevent Salem from getting them, thinking that was the only way possible that he could win, that there could be a chance to, I guess, not win against her, but stop her from defeating them. So the fact that Ruby's question to Jinn was completely dependent on what Ozpin knew does draw into question the accuracy of some of the things presented in the Lost Fable. But assuming that all of this is something that Ozpin knows for a fact is true and we were presented with true information, there's also the more important question based on the wording of Ruby's question to Jinn. Because what wasn't shown in the Lost Fable? That is what we need to be focusing on. Because Ruby's question was, what is Ozpin hiding from us? How do you define exactly what someone is hiding from you in terms of information? That seems very vague and leaves a lot of loopholes. Because if we boil it down to exactly what we learned from the Lost Fable and what the overall important information was to Team RWBY, it was that Salem is immortal and she cannot be killed. That is it. That is what Ozpin was hiding from them, that he never intended to tell anyone. And the rest of the Lost Fable was kind of fluff to get to that point, to tell us the history of Salem and Ozpin and the history of Remnant. From the writer's perspective, this was their way to show us that history without it feeling, too forced or anything like that. But there is still information that Ozpin is not telling Team RWBY and our protagonists, even at the end of Volume 8, that he's technically hiding from them, but, I'm sure he has an inclination to tell them at some point if they need to know. And so, it wasn't included in the Lost Fable. And there are a couple of very prominent examples of this. First and foremost, the location of the Relic of Choice. We learned back in Volume 5 when RWBY was asking about the Relic of Choice, when she realized that Salem now controlled Beacon Academy. Ozpin said, well, don't worry about the Relic of Choice, I made it a little bit more difficult to find. He's intentionally not telling anyone that information. But I'm sure at some point he will tell them if they need to know or if it becomes that crucial, but he's keeping that information close to his chest so that the information can't get back to Salem and she'll be able to get the relic. But that was never included in the Lost Fable. There are loopholes here. And in the Lost Fable itself, when that previous incarnation of Ozma asked Jinn those 3 questions, where are the relics located? What are their powers? And how do I destroy Salem? We only heard the answer to one of those questions. We only heard the answer to how do I destroy Salem. But where are the other relics located? That, frankly, isn't really a relevant question to us, the viewers, or to Team RWBY, as, well, they've been moved since that point, and they're now located underneath the academies. But what powers do they hold? That one in particular is something that Ozpin isn't really open with the information unless it's a need-to-know basis. Case in point, we didn't find out what the powers of the Relic of Creation were until the end of Volume 8. At that little round-table discussion in the Schnee Manor, Ozpin specifically said, I haven't even told you about the most complicated part of this plan yet, Ambrosius, the spirit of creation, and how specific you have to be with the information you give him so that he can actually create what you want. Because if you aren't able to explain the inner workings of it, then he won't be able to create it for you. That is definitely information that Ozpin knows that is relevant to Team RWBY, but he wasn't exactly hiding from them. So there is a lot that Ozpin knows that we just have not been given yet. Honestly, we may never know everything that Ozpin does. All of the different lives that he's lived, the information that he's gained throughout that, we may never know. But with the Lost Fable, there are definitely some things that we need to question. The accuracy of Ozpin's information, and how much information were we actually given? What information was specifically not given that Ozpin knows that, you know, he's not necessarily hiding from everyone, that he'll tell eventually, but it's not like it's something that he will absolutely never tell anyone no matter the circumstance. That he will, you know, die on that hill, essentially. But one other thing when it comes to the accuracy of Ozpin's information, and in particular regarding the fact that Ozpin is the one who has told us Salem's motivations, that Salem wants to die. We don't know exactly what that information is predicated on. Is it based on the information that we were shown in the Lost Fable, that she initially tried to end her own life after gaining that immortality? Was it something that she had said to Ozma when they spent time together? We don't exactly know why Ozpin said that, and why he thinks that's Salem's ultimate goal, but frankly, I don't think that's the case. Because if that was Salem's overall goal, it would have made a lot more sense for Salem to make her move during the Great War. Had she gone onto the battlefield to take out the King of Vale, take the relics from him, and at that point summon the gods, well, you know, humanity is most divided when they are at war. That would have been the perfect time to summon the gods and have everyone wiped out, likely including herself. But she didn't do that. She didn't make her move at that point in time. She made her move now. And she obviously doesn't really have any qualms about hiding her own presence from the world. She's openly revealing that to the world, and she had a smile on her face when Ruby's message went out to the rest of Remnant. So there's something else going on here. Something with Salem's motivations, and there is still a lot we don't know. We got a little bit of the history of Remnant in the Lost Fable, but what did the Lost Fable really tell us at the end of the day? All it told us was that Salem's immortal and she can't be killed. That's it. We really don't know anything at the end of the day, and there is still a lot more to come. This also shown by the fact that we're now introduced to other worlds that exist in the RWBY universe. We really don't know anything, and Volume 9 is going to show us that in full force as we explore this other realm, as we discover more about the universe of RWBY. So, yeah, we really don't know anything. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. How accurate do you think the Lost Fable actually was? Since the entire episode was based on Ozpin's memories and his knowledge of events, how accurate do you think it is? Do you think there's certain things that happened differently? We do know in the conversation that Salem and Ozpin had when they first reunited that Salem blamed the end of the world on the gods. Not her actions manipulating humanity into attacking the gods, but frankly, it was the gods who wiped out all of humanity, so that in and of itself might be slightly inaccurate. We don't know exactly what happened, or rather, what we do know could be inaccurate. And what do you think Ozpin knows that wasn't shown in the Lost Fable? There are so many questions that we still need answers to, and I'm sure there's going to be some answers in Volume 9 and in the coming volumes of RWBY, but there's also going to be a lot more questions that are brought up. So I would love to know your thoughts down below. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, got you thinking a little bit more about the RWBY series. It certainly got me thinking a lot more because, well, now I'm starting to question a lot more than I was previously before making this revelation, but, you know, if you did enjoy this video, want to see more RWBY content, more RWBY theories, and also coverage of Ice Queendom and Volume 9 when it eventually airs later this year, make sure to subscribe and join the Guild of the Eternal Flame. Tweet me at PhoenixKnight7, and I'll see you guys in the next video.